This is Tyler with Akua Performance, and today got an opportunity to sit down with Skylar from the Foundry Barbell. And Skylar, if you want to give it a go real quick, I was wanted to kind of start off with just asking you about where you started out with your lifting career, how that progressed over time, and kind of like where you're at today with that.
All right, yeah. You want to know anything about the gym or just go right into the
Well, let's get to the gym a little bit later.
Okay, yeah. So I started lifting in high school to honestly try to make it into play football at the next level, and nobody told me that, 5'7", 5'8", probably not playing football at the next level. And
They're called water boys.
yeah. But in doing so, I found like a pretty good love for strength sports. So I started lifting in like eighth grade. Went through high school competitive powerlifting with our high school powerlifting team. Through college, backed off some because I had to work and do those type of things.
Well, hold on real quick. Like when you were competitive in high school, like I think you already had a pretty solid foundational strength coming out of high school. So like, what were some of those numbers that you had, competing in high school? Because you said you're on a high school powerlifting team. Is
Yep.
that right?
So we had a pretty serious. We were a small D1 school. All of us played both ways.
Whoa.
Pause. We had to be able to play both ways and start and be able to finish games. And then we also didn't have a lot of other sports outside of football and basketball. I clearly was not going to play basketball. I did track and field. So with lifting, that was kind of my third sport. And I think my top numbers, if I remember correctly, were like 485 squat and just the belt in competition, like a 275 bench, and then I want to say like 500, 525 on the deadlift, and this is all like 185 to 195, and just a belt. I competed in 100% raw powerlifting back then. So yeah,
Very cool. And then right before I interrupted you, I think you were transitioning like right after high school from there.
Oh, so in college I didn't lift a whole lot for the first 2 or 3 years, and then luckily that's actually towards the end of that is when I kind of met you, Thor, Johan, Billy Mixon, and got back into it some. Dustin Raymer, some. All of us were kind of lifting together. I think that's when powerlifting started to come back. The raw powerlifting started to come back up, and did my first meet on like a 2-week notice. Hadn't been lifting. I think I squatted like 450, pulled 500, and benched like 315. I hadn't really been lifting that much at the time, but that meet at the old East Carolina barbell was like Matt Wishlinski was there, yep. Rich Tilden was there, Bryant Dilda, all these guys were like big around that time in this area, and that kind of reignited my love for competitive powerlifting, and that was like it's like probably 21, 22 around that time, 23 maybe.
Yeah, and I still remember. So I'm sure not many people will know, but that gym was literally a storage unit that Johan and Thor, a couple buddies of ours at the time, rented out and had a gym out of it. And it was actually pretty cool. But I remember one day pulling up for, I don't remember what competition it was that they had put on there. And I'm pulling into the storage unit lot, and I see this massive dude, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this dude is a freak, because all I can see is pecs and abs from like, I don't know, I'm at least like 50 to 100 yards away, and as I get closer, I realize it's not a freak. It's Skylar, and the only reason I see giant pecs and abs is because he has shaved them into his hair sweater that he has. It's just these giant pecs and abs. But from like a distance, all you could see was giant pecs and abs. But in other words, it's just because if you take your shirt off, it looks like you have a sweater on.
Yeah, that was we did an inner gym challenge with Tier 1 at the time. Yep. And all those guys were like shredded CrossFitters. And then I was there at like 240, 250, just, soft. And I was like, if they're going to all have abs, one of us should have abs. So I shaved them in. That was a good time. Yeah, so that's around that time was when I started taking it a lot more serious, training a lot harder with the goal of expanding my training business and also pushing towards some personal goals in raw powerlifting. And from there, it just kind of took off, along with raw powerlifting coming back into, popularity.
And then, so like transition that into like your raw powerlifting, because you've had some very respectable numbers on the platform. So, like, I'm sure it's spread across a couple of different meets, but maybe let's hear like maybe what some of your best numbers were.
So, my best wrap squat was 804 and a belt and knee wraps at like 308. And then I benched 475 at like 303. And then, unfortunately, my best deadlift was 650 at 230. As my body weight went up, the leverages got bad and the deadlift went down.
Well, I mean, but like for anybody who doesn't know Skylar, it's like the deadlift really isn't his fault. If you see his hands, they're so small. I mean, you realize
Child's hands.
They're not wrapping around too much of a bar.
Around that time I hired Corey Hayes.
Yeah.
And Corey was first lifting coach I had, and cannot put the importance of having Corey there for, Corey coached me for, and still helps a lot, 7-8 years at least. And went from, I think I ended up squatting like 625 at the time at 210 and pulling like 600 and benching 340 or 350 at 210. The first meet with Corey, or maybe right after that, I can't quite remember. And then from there, me and him working together went from those numbers up to the numbers I just said. Had a 600-pound front squat and just sleeves, 300-pound strict overhead press, hit 500 to a one board a few times on bench. So, some good numbers, I think,
Yeah.
That's
like that actually, I was going to ask this a little bit later on, but it's an interesting segue since you brought up Corey, and I think it's now like probably a good time to like plug for Corey, because I know he's been like a really good influence and kind of resource for you. But I also wanted to segue into any coaches, nutritionists, whatever, like that you've used along the way that, that you felt have helped accelerate some of your progress, things that you've, maybe things you've learned from them. Because I know like early on you worked with individuals like Shelby Starnes. Yep. I know you've worked with Corey quite a few times.
Yep.
And some other individuals. So, I mean, like shamelessly, let's plug Corey and his gym and, what he's about. But then also, some of the other individuals, like I mentioned, that or ones that I didn't mention, but also like not only that, but just the importance of the whole concept of, the value of a coach. Like even coaches need a coach because you need that second lens or somebody looking at it from a different angle.
So, Corey at Hayes Training Systems out of Pikeville, Kentucky. Like I said, Corey has been kind of the foundation for everything I did for up until like the last few years. And the only thing with that is because I've slowly transitioned to jiu-jitsu, but everything strength-wise that's been accomplished has been through Corey. And then as far as his coaching and the importance of that, it was like, hey, you need, Corey was the first one to ever be like, hey, you need to get your sleep right. You need to take care of stressors outside of your life. And this was when I was like 26, 27, still being kind of an idiot. And like, I can get 3 hours of sleep, go in and train. And then like understanding the importance of how hard training needed to be. I think if we all program for ourselves, we're going to take it a little easy. If we're honest, there's some like real hardcore guys out there that maybe won't, but I think at any given time, if you're doing your own programming or coaching and you don't have somebody there to say, hey, like, was this your best? You've got really good goals. Are you pushing as hard as you need to? So Corey was the foundation, the rock of that, of everything. Like, can say that bar none. We probably wouldn't have the gym at the rate that we have it if it wasn't for Corey pushing for not only excellence in training but also like in outside factors. I worked with Shelby Starnes for a while. It's really funny. East Carolina Barbell. I remember there's a guy named. Do you remember? His last name was Leonardis. That freak. Athletic freak, white guy from New Jersey.
Yep.
So
I remember
me
him.
and him were talking one day, and he's like, if you want to get stronger, you should gain X amount of weight for your height. So I got to like 280 of just pudge. And then I hired Shelby after that. And Shelby's the one that got me back down to 210 and helped me kind of get straightened out and kind of taught me the importance of macros and tracking food and getting the right foods in. From there, I worked with Mike Israetel, who Mike set me up on my run to actually being competitive in powerlifting. I dropped from like 260 to like 230, 225 with him, and kept all my strength with Corey. So I think at that time squatted like 740 or 750 in competition, benched like 385 or 390, pulled 6 something, and that was while dropping 20, 30 pounds,
Nice.
So Mike was real instrumental in, hey, you don't have to eat just chicken, rice, and broccoli. You can balance some of this food out, and some other important factors there with Mike. From there, I've as far as nutrition, I've worked with a few other names. I think right now I'm working with a lady out of Canada. Her name's Lindsay Martin. She's under Tactical Nutrition, and I think Lindsay has been really important for me now. Kind of, there's some blind spots, with coaching yourself or thinking a lot. Understanding what lifestyles lead to some stuff you miss. So, like, I didn't even realize I was missing meals throughout the day with Lindsay. I'd be like, oh, yeah, I ate. And then she'd be like, are you sure you ate? And I'm like, yeah, totally. And then I get home, and I'm like, I haven't eaten in like 6 hours. No wonder I'm starving. So Lindsay's been really good. We talked about for the podcast getting a understanding of how to eat more of, it sounds so cliche, lifestyle, like making changes, little small changes throughout the day that support an overall athletic goal or a goal of anything that's not the normal. Like jiu-jitsu is really important now, staying strong is important, but how those little individual daily goals and changes to your lifestyle actually add up to help support the more overarching athletic goals. So I've worked with her for a while now, and it's been wonderful to see the different approach to nutrition while still having a kind of a beat on performance, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Like, so with her, and I've looked at her Instagram. She's pretty impressive athletically as well. Yeah. But something that you mentioned is like just kind of like the subtle things as far as having a positive impact on like your perception and making things a lifestyle factor is like, those are the big things. Like when I'm working with clients is helping them realize it's these small little boring changes over a long period of time that are going to have the most profound impact, rather than that flashy dumb shit that you saw that this individual did on Instagram and it worked for him overnight. And it's like, no, that shit actually fucking worked.
Yeah. And it was funny because like I hired her, we had a long talk about what I wanted long-term and where I was going. And then the first couple months she was like, you need to get your fiber intake and you need to get your micronutrient goals. And I was like, cool, when are we going to start losing fat? And she's like, you haven't got your fiber intake yet, so why don't we get your fiber intake up before we ever get that? And I was like, so frustrated. But I was like, from the what we talk about from a coaching perspective is when somebody hires me, I expect them to ask as many questions and all the questions they need to ask, but also to understand there's a reason for it. And I'll tell them the reason, and so with Lindsay, it was like, I'm not going to question, why she's taking this long, drawn-out approach, because I hired her, I'm paying her. Why am I going to question somebody I paid? But
But there's a difference between questioning to understand and questioning to
100%.
to question like somebody's competency on something.
100%. That was never thing. But I think that goes back to, like you said, coaches having to have a coach. I've always had a coach or somebody in my corner. It's like I still go back to Corey. I could shoot him a text right now and be like, "What do you think about this?" And he'll be like, and we'll talk about it. And it's just another set of eyes, another viewpoint, another perspective. And I can't state that enough of how important that is, for long-term success.
Yeah, and I don't know if you're watching this, Corey. I don't know you that well. I know you passively through Skylar, but your programming sucks. I've done it, and it's fucking brutal. And I don't think I'll ever do it again. So you won't get my money.
Yeah, I think the it's funny you say that because like I look at people's programming now today, and there is a lot to be said about recovery and training correctly and with a measured approach. But I think so many times people don't understand that training, if you have hard goals and high expectations, training has to be hard. And I'll never forget the first day I did Corey's programming. I came in dehydrated, stayed up the night before. It was hot at the old tier 1 spot, and it was 8x3 on regular squats, 5x5 on like Paul squats, 4x6 on like snatch grip RDLs, 30 GHRs, then like walking lunges, and then like something else for aerobic, like a small aerobic thing. And I made it through the first sets of squats, and I texted him. I was like, I can't hit depth because my quads are cramping, and I don't think I'm going to make it through the workout. And he was like, yeah, I know because I've seen your training, and you train like an idiot.
Like a bitch.
I was trying to be polite. But, yeah, he's like, you train like a bitch. And it was a wake-up call. It was a wake-up call for sure. But I've never been stronger. And now it's funny, like I've got little aches and pains now. But over the years of training with Corey, like my body got so strong in so many different ways from the hard training that now I'm like, maybe my training's not hard enough now. No, I'm kidding. It's hard enough now. It's brutal right now.
Yeah, so for anybody, like I was obviously bullshitting about Corey's program, and like if you want top-notch programming and coaching, absolutely don't hesitate to hit Corey Hayes up. And Skylar as well. Skylar's a coach here at the Foundry, so if you're local to the Greenville, North Carolina area, you can get hands-on training with Skylar. And I think you also do remote client training as well, right?
I do online training. Yep.
Okay, cool. One thing I also wanted to actually hold on before we get into that, Kyle. Can we pause it real quick so I can drain the vein? Let's do that. All right, now that I'm done draining it, can't remember where the heck we left off.
We were talking about we finished up talking about the programming and.
Oh yeah. So I remember when I had moved out to Texas, you were getting like where your client or roster of clients was picking up quite a bit, and then I remember just through like talking with you and seeing some of your posts and stuff, I remember seeing that you were getting several female clients, and you were getting some like really impressive results out of a lot of your female clients. I remember just seeing some females just getting extremely strong under your coaching, and was maybe just wanted to get some feedback on you. Like, what is it about? Like, what do you do with females? Is there anything that you do differently with females versus training males? And then maybe just, spitball, some of the numbers that you've been able to get some of your female clients up to.
Let's go over the numbers first, because I think that's like I do tend to have a lot of success with training female clients. I don't know where that comes from. Like, I don't know if it's. I mean, I know I know the training perspective where it comes from. I don't know where that. I kind of picked up on that early. So the first kind of the numbers that kind of pop off the mind was a client named Brittany. She squatted 300 at 120. back before a lot of people listening to this now are going to be like, oh, that's nothing. This was back before powerlifting where it is now, where it's like that's like warm up numbers sometimes. 10 years ago, that wasn't heard about a lot. She benched 175 at 123 and then pulled like 275. And these are all drug-free numbers, obviously.
And I think it's also important to mention, like, to add some context around that, like, 300's impressive for a female. Like,
yes, even to this day, it's impressive. It's just there's so many numbers on Instagram that make you, if you're on Instagram, you're watching female or guy lifters, all you see is the highlight reels, and you don't realize that's, 1 out of 100 or whatever the number is. It's still these numbers are still very impressive. It's just, I know there's going to be some Instagram keyboard warrior that's like, oh, well, that's not that great. It's awesome.
Well, the added context too is that, like, and I'm sure you had a couple, but most of these females weren't like competitive D1 collegiate athletes that already had like these amazing athletic and strength foundations established, and they weren't like genetically just like extremely gifted females. A lot of these were just like, I'm a hairdresser during the day, or that type.
So that's actually a good point, and something that I probably don't think about enough is all these numbers I'm probably about to sprout out. I would say all of them came to me with very little lifting knowledge. So Brittany, she had never lifted weights before she came to me. I had a girl at the same time. Her name was Maddie. She had very similar numbers to Brittany, had never trained before. It's funny, Maddie came in and was like, I've never lifted weights. I want to do a strongman competition. And I was like, let's talk about it. And she's like, well, I already signed up. And I was like, well, let's get going. And she did that strongman competition. She came in second, by the way, which was, she lapped like a 180-pound stone and like got stone over at like 130 pounds. Like, I watched and I was like, oh my God. So we had Maddie then, Brittany. I've got a ton of girls that have benched over 200 that are, 150, 140. The only thing I'm missing right now is a 400-pound deadlift. That's like the thing I need in my roster of accomplishments. But there's a ton of girls right now in the gym. Gina, KD, Susan, all benching over 200, all squatting close to 4, all pulling close to 4. I've just always had a pretty good knack for training female clients. My wife is very strong. She squatted 265 at 130 in sleeves for like a double or triple. She's pulled over 315 sumo and conventional, and then she's benched like 150 or 160.
And for any girls out there watching that are like, oh my gosh, I bet all of these girls look like just monsters, and no, like all of these are very feminine. Like, they don't have like the body type that a lot of females that don't lift weights, that are scared of lifting weights because of that. Like, these are not that, they don't have that body type at all.
Yeah, so I tell a lot of that now, it's not thanks to CrossFit, honestly, and thanks to Instagram with powerlifting and some of the other strength sports, Olympic lifting, bodybuilding. It's been a lot easier to convince people that you're not going to turn into like me or you or something when they lift. But back in the day, that was a very hard sell. It was like, hey, we're going to train you lifting weights, and you're going to get very strong. And they'd be like, oh my God, I don't want to look that way. And I'm like, you're not. And like, the thing I used to tell them is like, you're going to drop 2 to 3 dress sizes and you're going to weigh 10 pounds more. And they would be like, what? And then it would happen. And my favorite thing was like when they used to go to like, a wedding or a party or something, and they'd send me a picture of their upper back and their dress, and they're like, look how jacked I am, and then look at how awesome I look in this dress. And that's what we all want, right? Like, nobody wants to walk around not feeling good about themselves. So weight training does that. And I think that's honestly where women kind of, you asked like how I kind of figure that out. I think once you get women to figure out that like they can be very strong and they can take care of themselves, and like that means like, we go to move stuff around the house. I don't call Kyle. I don't call you. I don't call anybody. I like, hey, Carrie, come help me grab this couch. And we grab the couch and we move it.
Because what was her deadlift again?
Over 300, and she's pulled 300 for like 3, so like 325 I think's her best or something. So like she'll help me move anything around the house, and I think once women figure that out, they're like, oh, like this is, awesome. I feel empowered. I feel good about myself. I can do all this stuff. I don't need to, get a friend over. I don't need to ask anybody. And I think that kind of clicks something in their mind, and they get kind of hooked on it, which is good. And then this is not a knock on dudes, but dudes are just hard-headed. Like 90% of them, they're hard-headed, and they just like want to lift hard and heavy all the time. And training doesn't have to be heavy to be hard. And women are like, since they're afraid of the weights a little bit when they come in, they're okay with volume, and they're okay with building, and they're okay with range of motion. Whereas dudes are like, no, I want to squat really heavy, and I want to do like a half squat because I can lift more. Where chicks are like, oh, I'll get a bigger ass if I squat all the way to the floor and come up, and I don't have to use as much weight. Deal. I'm done. I'm in. And then you stack that for like 6 months, 8 months, a year, and next thing you know, you've changed your body and you're really strong.
And I just realized you have an excellent coaching model with that, because first of all, you get these ladies in, you make them freakishly strong, then their husbands start to feel emasculated, and then they call and they're like, hey, Skylar, I got to get strong because my wife moves all the furniture and she doesn't ask me, and now she's outside changing the brake pads.
And she's making fun of me, and there's nothing I can do about it.
And I'm actually on my way to the police station to file a domestic violence charge on her right now.
She told me I was at victim weight.
Under 200 pounds for anybody who's watching.
It's victim weight.
So, what's the difference then with like how you train females and how you train males? It strictly not like from a psychological standpoint, or just like straight up programming. Is there anything different? Do you see that one handles something better, or
in my experience, women tend to handle volume better across the board, and they tend to, I don't want to say they recover better, because I don't think at its core premise that recovering better, it's obviously what's helping drive their goals or gains or however you want to say it, but I don't think it's because they're chicks. I think it's probably because they prioritize sleep probably a little bit more. They're probably less likely to go out and do dumb shit on the side, whereas dudes are like, oh, I went to the gym, and then my buddy said that let's go out and go hunting all day. Whatever it is, I think chicks just recover better inherently. And then when you add in the added volume that they can typically handle, you end up seeing that package kind of shoot them a little bit ahead. Because the client I was telling you about earlier that's gained, the guy that's gained 50 pounds and looks good now and's got really strong, he does all the stuff that I see the chicks do without even thinking. He eats what he's supposed to. He takes care of himself. He makes sure he gets to sleep at night. And he sees the same gains as the chicks. I just think the chicks do it without even meaning to, if that makes sense.
Right.
A lot of times for me, if I tell a girl, hey, if you get enough sleep and you eat this and you train hard, you'll have this result. They go, cool, got it. I'm going to do it. You give a dude that and he's going to be like, yeah, maybe. Yeah. And you have to prove it to a guy, whereas chicks just listen. Yeah. And oh no!
Come on, roast them for that one.
Women just listen,
Oh, because they like me.
I can't attest to dudes being hard-headed, but
Yeah.
I was one of them.
Yeah,
that's exactly correct.
Yeah, Kyle came in and started training with me, and I was like, this is what we're going to do. It's going to work. You're just going to have to trust me. And he was like, okay. And then I didn't see him for like 2 weeks. I was like, you have to come in for it to work. So, yeah.
Whoa. So I got a little bit out of order there, but I guess it could segue into now, because now you have the Foundry. We didn't go into much detail on that.
Right.
what is the Foundry? How did it get started? And that's pretty much owned and operated by you and Carrie for the most part now, right?
Yep. So I tell people this, and like some people laugh. Outside of so in 8th grade, we were like, write a journal, and we need 3 life goals. First goal, play in the NFL. Once again, people need to like rein me in. Number 2 was, if that didn't work, I wanted to train athletes. Number 3 was own a gym. And so I knew very early on that I wanted to live this type of lifestyle. I just really didn't know how I was going to get there. And then working in gyms, I've only ever worked in one true Globo gym. I've always worked in like warehouse gyms. Yep. And I've worked at some really awesome gyms. We talked about East Carolina Barbell before. They kind of gave me the idea of how to set up my training and payment model, which I thought was awesome. And then I went to Tier 1, and I worked at Tier 1 for like 8 years, and I saw the community they had. Tier 1, for a lot of people that don't know, for the longest time was the largest CrossFit gym on the East Coast, one of the oldest. And when Neil and Brandon ran it, we had strongmen, Olympic lifters, power lifters, bodybuilders, and CrossFit athletes all underneath one roof. I had some of my buddies that were in the NFL training with me underneath there. We had everything. People came and went as they wanted to. The gym was like a big, family. And that's where I was like, okay, when I open my gym, I want the same type vibe. Yeah. I want it to be a place that people can get away from all their bullshit day to day. They can come in and be supported by their friends, but then you don't have to be a power lifter. You don't have to be this. You can just come in and use the equipment. So I kind of melded all the things I liked from the other gyms I've been around and tried to build it with one.
And you get to pick your own music.
And you get to pick your own music if I'm not in here.
Otherwise, it's Tyler Childers.
Yeah, Tyler Childers or EDM. It just depends on what mood I'm feeling. So we opened this place up in 2020, 2021, somewhere around there. Tyler helped a lot at the beginning with getting things kind of going, and then he said something about Carrie helping me run it. I do the day-to-day stuff. Carrie kind of keeps me on the back end, straight. She comes in and is like, hey, we need to do this, we need that, because really outside of training and running the gym, that's all I care about. I need admin help, so she helps with that. But we've just tried to create a place where everybody can come through the doors, can get strong, can look better, feel better, and also have just a nice place to just come. And, we have people all the time, they'll be on their off weeks and they'll come in, they're like, hey, I'm just going to hang out because this is my place. And that makes me just as happy as seeing a big squat or deadlift,
And you guys have hosted how many meets here now?
So we've hosted 2, and going forward, we're gonna try to host one every fall and spring, depending on what that looks like, whatever month. We run the meets, we set the meets up, we have them. All of our lifters come in and help or compete, and it's so far they run quick, they run smooth. And that's a testament to our community. We have so many guys are like, hey, the next meet, I want to help spot and load. And they volunteer, which makes my life way easier.
And I actually came and watched the last meet, and it's a well-ran meet. I've been to some before, and it's awful. It's obvious that whoever set it up just didn't have their ducks in a row. And you go to some meets, and it's it just runs perfect. And what I observed here was a really, really well thought out, things just, they flowed well. So if somebody's interested, they're like, hey, I'm not too far from that area, I would like to actually go there, I'd like to compete, I'd like to see what that community's like, how do they is this posted on Instagram? How do they get or how are they made aware of that?
So we do everything through Instagram, and then we also have our signups on the FoundryBarbell.com. We'll start posting here in the next month. We'll start posting stuff for our meets in the spring, and then you can sign up through the FoundryBarbell.com, and you'll see announcements and stuff through the Foundry Barbell on Instagram.
Very cool. Well, homie, let's wrap it up there. signing out from the Foundry Barbell. Again, my name's Tyler with Akuo.
Skylar from the Foundry Barbell.
Thanks, guys.